The old woman's frail hand twitched. Her fingers curled and uncurled around the worn velvet pouch. She smelled the salty tang of the sea on the breeze, heard the cries of gulls, and the rhythmic crashing of waves against the pier. It was time. Maria stood up, her joints aching with every movement like the timbers of the old pier groaning under the pressure of the relentless tides. Each step took an eternity, but she persevered until she reached the end of the pier, its edge worn smooth by countless seasons of wind and wave. A young woman sat perched on the other side of the world, oblivious to the sunrise that was painting the sky over the sea. She was hunched over her computer, eyes fixed on the blinking cursor on the blank canvas of the web page in front of her. She was a journalist, a storyteller, and today she had writer's block. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, she decided to take a long walk along the coast, hoping the vastness of the sea would soothe her troubled mind. She walked for hours, breathing in the salty air, listening to the wind's mournful song through the grasses, watching the waves roll and crash on the shore. In the distance, she saw an old woman standing at the end of the weathered wooden pier that stretched out into the sea. Curiosity piqued, she quickened her pace. As she drew closer, she could see the old woman was tossing something into the waves. At first, it looked like a leaf. Then she realized it was a flower, a red rose. Every morning for the past 72 years, this woman had come to the pier to toss a flower into the churning waters. But why? The journalist wanted to know. She introduced herself to the woman, who was known only as Maria. Maria agreed to answer her questions if she would join her for tea, and so they sat down together in the little house that stood behind the old woman's cottage. Over steaming cups of tea, the journalist heard a tale as old as time itself, a tale of forbidden love and sacrifice. Maria's story began in a small village nestled between rolling hills and the vast expanse of the sea. It was here that she met Antonio, the love of her life, whose heart beat in time with her own. They were young, their love was passionate, and their dreams were as endless as the horizon. Antonio was a fisherman, his skin tanned and weathered by the sun, his eyes the color of the sea after a storm, his smile as disarming as the dawn. He had traveled the world, and when he returned home, he brought with him tales of distant lands and treasures beyond compare. He spoke of bustling markets in faraway cities, their stalls piled high with spices and silks, of majestic mountains that touched the clouds, and of deserts that stretched as far as the eye could see. But Maria yearned for more than just stories. She wanted to experience the world for herself, to feel the sand between her toes on faraway beaches, to hear the lilting melodies of foreign street musicians, and to taste the exotic flavors of unknown fruits. And so they made a pact sealed with a kiss under the watchful gaze of the ancient oak tree that stood at the edge of the village. They would save their pennies, work extra shifts, and one day they would set sail for adventure. They saved for years, their dream growing with each passing season, until finally they had enough. Money to buy a ticket on a ship bound for the New World. Their hearts raced with excitement as they boarded the vessel, the salty temps of the sea filling their lungs, the feel of the wind in their hair, the sound of the waves crashing against the hull a lullaby to their dreams. The journey was long and fraught with peril. Storms tossed the ship like a toy in a bathtub, waves crashing over the deck, winds screaming like banshees, and the relentless sun beating down on their faces. But through it all, Antonio and Maria held on to each other, their love a beacon guiding them through the darkness. One day the captain called out, "Land ho!" The cry echoed across the deck, mingling with the shouts of joy from the passengers. After weeks at sea, the sight of land, even a hazy outline on the horizon, brought tears to their eyes. Finally, their ordeal was over. Soon they would set foot on solid ground once more, but fate had other plans. That night, a terrible storm arose, the likes of which none on board had ever seen. Waves the size of mountains reared up out of the sea, crashing down on the helpless ship. The wind howled, threatening to tear the very sails from their masts. People screamed in terror as the ship groaned and creaked ominously. In the midst of the chaos, Maria woke to find Antonio kneeling beside her, his face ashen, his eyes wide with fear. Maria," he whispered, his voice hoarse with urgency. "We're in trouble. Must prepare for the worst." Before she could ask any questions, he was gone, swallowed up by the raging tempest that had transformed the ocean into a furious beast. She clung to the wreckage of the ship, her heart pounding in her chest, her mind filled with images of Antonio's anguished face. The storm raged for what seemed like an eternity, but in reality was no more than a few short hours. When it finally subsided, Maria found herself alone on a deserted island, the only survivor of the ill-fated voyage. Days turned into weeks and weeks into months. Maria survived on the island, subsisting on berries and rainwater, her only companions the mournful cries of seabirds and the ceaseless whisper of the waves. Every day she walked to the highest point on the island, scanning the horizon for a ship, a lighthouse, or any sign of human life. But all she saw was the endless expanse of the ocean, mocking her with its indifference. One day, as she stood on the rocky headland, a ship appeared on the horizon. Hope surged through her like a tidal wave. She ran to the beach, waving her arms frantically. The ship changed course and headed toward the island. Rescue had come at last. When the men on the ship saw her, they cheered, rushing to help. They carried her off the island, cradling her like a precious cargo, their rough hands gentle with concern. When she regained consciousness, she was in a hospital bed, the scent of antiseptic sharp in her nostrils, the sound of voices murmuring around her.
Ass.
She learned that the ship's crew had found her on the island, weak and delirious, and brought her to the nearest hospital. But when they asked her about Antonio, her heart broke all over again. He was gone. The ship that had rescued her had found no trace of him among the wreckage of the ill-fated voyage. In the days that followed, the villagers offered her condolences, their words kind but empty. They couldn't understand why she refused to accept the reality that Antonio was dead. How could they, when they hadn't loved him as she had? As the years passed, the pain in Maria's heart gradually faded into a dull ache. She never forgot Antonio, but she learned to live without him. She threw herself into her work, eventually opening her own shop in town, where she sold handmade items that brought a bit of beauty into people's lives. But every day at sunrise, she walked to the pier and tossed a flower into the sea, a silent goodbye to the love of her life, a promise to never forget. And every day for the rest of her life, the sea took her offering, crashing it against the shore and carrying it away into its vast depths. For 72 years, she continued this ritual, her love for Antonio unwavering, her faith in their reunion eternal. Then one day the journalist found her. She sat at the edge of the world, watching the sun rise over the sea, a single red rose in her hand. As the first rays of sunlight touched the water, she closed her eyes, a peaceful smile gracing her lips. She tossed the rose into the sea, its petals floating on the surface for a moment before disappearing below the waves. With a final sigh, she slumped forward, her body still and cold, her face serene, as if in a deep sleep. The young journalist sat by the old woman's side, waiting for the sunrise. As the first rays of light touched the water, she closed her eyes, a single red rose in her hand. When she opened them, she saw the ocean stretching out before her, endless and eternal. Taking a deep breath, she stepped forward and tossed the rose into the sea, its petals floating on the surface for a moment before disappearing below the waves. And as the sun climbed higher in the sky, the young journalist continued the ritual, knowing that every year on this day, she would come to the sea to say goodbye to the love of her life. For in the end, it is love that conquers all, even death.